Hi there, it's Sarah of Get Weaving. Last time I was chatting to you about our first book, which was called Simply Woven, published in 1986, and how we went round to different guilds and gave demonstrations with our rigid Heddle looms, showing people the sorts of things you could make on them. And then, completely out of the blue, in 2006, we were invited by a publisher in London, Gaia Publishing, part of the Octopus Book Group, if we would produce the first book in a series of creative crafts. Now, the first thing we had to do was have a chat with somebody about what sort of thing they wanted. So one of their staff came down to visit us. We got lots of fabrics out, lots of pieces of clothing. We weren't really quite sure what they wanted at the time. And they told us it was going to be a series of creative craft books. They were going to be square, which I like the square format. And one of the most important things for us was that the diagrams and the information were next to the photographs. So you're not pictures at the front and all the instructions at the back. So we had a good old chat, and the lady that we saw came up with this. It's called a flat plan. Ever so interesting. Because they're printing a number of large sheets that then have to be cut down and collated, they have to make sure that each page is relevant and all the important things are covered. So you have to have a title page, you have to have what's called an imprint, you have to have a contents, you have an index and a glossary, and then you sort of try and work out how many pages each project is going to have, what you've got left. So we showed her some of the things that we were doing. It was trying to show the scope of what you could do with a rigid Heddle loom. So although a lot of it is tabby weave, depending on what yarns you use, what colours you use, you can make such an enormous variety of different fabrics. So she started to give some of the projects names. We decided we were going to do them in groups of colours. So there were oranges, reds, greens, purples, which was lovely. So we had to do a little bit more weaving to fill in any gaps that there were. This wasn't really, generally speaking, fabric for clothing. It was more homewares, quite small items. Some of the project names that we had come up with, they changed. The only reason we can think that is because they would be easier to translate into different languages, different nationalities. So, for example, I had one called Fireworks, and that was changed to Carnival. It didn't really matter too much. One of the things that we really wanted to do was show that the yarns in our project could be swapped for something else. So what we did is in the corner here, just down here, we had life-size warp and weft. So that if somebody wanted to make something similar but had different colours, as long as they were roughly this size, we'd given them information on the heddle that they would need, roughly wraps per inch, all that sort of thing. And then we were taking our own photographs, which we then sent to them, and they did the page layouts for us. We had quite a lot of toing and froing. We were going to London. One of the biggest problems that we had was the terminology, because we have always done few words, lots of pictures. That just seems to work for us. The publisher wanted a lot more words, and sometimes things were a bit lost in translation. So we had to make a few visits to London with a loom all threaded up to say, this is how it works. If you explain it like this, it's not going to work. So between us, we kind of got there. As things were moving along, they would send us proofs. So, for example, this was one of the pages. The nice thing is these were our photographs, and then they got their designer to draw them. So I think they're my hands. I'm not absolutely sure now. It was Elizabeth and I. One of us took the photos, one did the demonstrating, and then they were turned into these diagrams, which I think are lovely. This is what we had to check, is that the instructions actually made sense. The pages, so that's one project called C. So this was the first possible layout. And then later on it was changed to this one. So what you've got here is photographs, close-ups. They kind of put sort of flowery descriptions with things, which was okay. Hidden depths of the sea. That's not really our style. Didn't matter too much. One of the things we did have to talk to them about, though, was the colour of the pages, because on some of them, the colour in the background was so dark you couldn't see the print. So things went backwards and forwards for quite a few months. But generally speaking, we were pretty pleased with it anyway. So this was the book called Creative Weaving. It was finally published in 2007. That's the back page. It's, as I said, it's generally homewares. So there's a glossary at the back and a gallery of some of the woven pieces, which Elizabeth and I had made on our rigid Heddle looms. So when we went to London, once we'd sorted all these sort of things out, they then asked us if we'd be interested in doing a book on spinning. And we were a bit confused about this, partly because we hadn't seen what the first book was going to look like, but also because they wanted it done in 6 weeks. So although we did have ideas on the sort of spinning book that we could do, we actually handed that on to somebody else. The time was far too short to do it properly. And then that book was published. We went out and we gave talks. We had stands at the big shows. We were at Woolfest Wales and Wonderwool Wales and Woolfest in Cumbria. And again, people were amazed at what could be made on a small loom. Most of them still have memories of weaving around a piece of cardboard at school. So this is the kind of stand that we put together. This was Wonderwool Wales in 2008. So we do have a few garments on there. Same sort of format. Rigid Heddle looms set up. There's a piece here. Whoops, that one there. That was a sort of mat all made with recycled plastic bags. We were just trying to get things a bit more exciting than perhaps they had been in the past. There's a fleecy rug there. There's tea towels doing in colour and weave. There are cushions. There's something made with pickup sticks. And as I say, 1 or 2 garments in the background. And meanwhile, Ashford had come up with these wonderful plastic Heddles. Now, the first ones were bright blue, and it was called the Knitter's Loom. I've never asked them about this, but I assume it was just to get knitters who have loads and loads of yarn trying a different technique. And obviously, these plastic Heddles were fantastic for some of the modern yarns that we have. Whereas, as I said last time, before that, they were generally only really suitable for very fine yarns. So nowadays, you can get anything from 2.5 ends to the inch to, well, I've got a 15 as well, which is quite fine. They don't make them blue anymore, though, because people thought that perhaps this was just a toy. So that wasn't really particularly helpful. They also produce these wonderful brochures. This is from my 16-inch rigid Heddle, showing you how to thread up, because before this we were still using a walking board. Having quick threading just made things so much easier. So you can be out in the garden with your loom clamped up one end and a peg down the other end, or if you've got a long hallway, or nowadays I often use my warping frame as well so that I can get extra length. So I can do up to about 350 inches, I think. So we were doing demonstrations, still trying to encourage people to have a go. And then round about 2012, 13, something like that, people were still asking if Simply Woven, our first book, was available, and it was long out of print. So we looked into having it reprinted. But the original one was slides, and to have them changed into digital format was going to be really, really expensive. So we decided we'd start again. So that was the beginning of another journey, getting all our clothes together, getting our models together, rushing around the garden again. That was good fun. So very nice. We were lucky to have the same model. So this is Sarah in 1986, and then here she is again on the front cover of Get Weaving in 2006. Brilliant. And also we used Elizabeth's daughter and my daughter as models in this book. So it was a thoroughly family affair. It was wonderful. And again, we were going around the garden, testing out different places to take the photographs, to see what the light was like. And again, we were trying to put in a variety of things, different sorts of clothes, things that we just enjoy wearing: tops, trousers, coats, no ponchos. Oh. One poncho. Trying to show different techniques, trying to use as many different yarns as possible. Each project this time had 4 pages. So, for example, this one here is a skirt cut sideways. Now, what we're doing with this, though, Simply Woven actually had shapes in. We are saying with this book, use your tried and tested patterns. So if you have a skirt pattern that you've made before and you want to try making it in hand woven fabric, this is how you might have a go. You might be able to produce a fabric that looks a bit like this. Use your own pattern. This is how you could lay it out. Try it first. We put reed threading in, layouts, page layouts again, just to show that there's very little wastage. Now, obviously, since then, we've produced quite a few patterns from this, but to start with, this was just diagrams, photographs. Again, our top 10 tips about using yarn on woven interfacing, using paper as a separator on the back of the loom, having your piece of weaving in the centre of your heddle, all those things that make such a difference. And the nice thing about our Get Weaving book is that we, again, produce the whole thing ourselves. So we did the photographs, we did the diagrams, we did the layouts, and then wonderfully there was a printer that lived, or the premises wasn't too far away, so we could literally just pop in and see them. And they were changing page layouts, colours, fonts, what have you, just on a massive monitor. So it was much easier to go up and chat to them and say, well, could we have that picture a bit bigger and that one a bit darker, and can you crop this one? And that was wonderful. They were really helpful. They were in Suffolk. They are called Leiston Press in Leiston in Suffolk. And the nice thing was that we were kind of in touch with every single stage. So if there was something that wasn't quite right, the girl who was helping us out, I think it was her first job, she was absolutely brilliant. And we'd go in and say, well, can you try this or try that? So we actually had 2 or 3 different front covers, which was just marvellous. And then we were able to go home and choose the font that we wanted and the colours that we wanted. So in the end, this we were just really pleased with. So again, we were going to shows, setting up stands, which was great fun, with rails of garments that we'd made and the looms set up, and showing people how to do the quick threading just on a table, and encouraging people to have a go. Lots of children tried, actually, and they were really good and really enthusiastic. I thought, well, they've probably never done this before, so they don't have the same sort of preconceptions about it. Yes, so we did that for 3 or 4 years. The funny thing was, of course, people would come along and say, well, how much is that? How much is that garment? And we'd have to say, we're not selling our clothes, but we will sell you a book and encourage you to have a go at making your own things. Personally, I've never made a garment for somebody from my hand woven fabric. I think it's a minefield. If it's not perfect, if it's not the right colour, the right size, the right weight, it's such a lot of work. I was wearing a pinafore dress at one show that a lady really liked, and she said, can you make me one of those? It was all hand spun. I thought, I can't make this again. So I just sold her the dress. It was so much easier, and I made myself another one in a different colour. I think making clothing to sell is, well, I'd rather teach. So at one of the shows, I think it was Wonderwall Wales, I was wearing this dress. This is DR001. It has a centre front, centre back panels, side panels and godays. This is my daughter wearing it though. And a lady said to me, where do you get your patterns from? And we told her we made them ourselves. And she said, well, could I buy a copy? And I thought, well, yes, I suppose so. I had to go home and get my head around that. And since then, that was the first pattern I produced. Again, all narrow fabrics, no waist if possible. So that's the page layout. You can see there's very little wastage on there. This was wool and silk warp and hand spun Shetland weft. And the dress I'm wearing actually at the moment is another version of the same thing. The centre panel and the pockets are woven, and the sides are a purchase fabric, the linen. I'll put a picture of this up in a minute. And then since then, I've made loads of short versions, loads of tops. So with that pattern, I include this sheet showing you how to make a shorter top. And again, one of the tops has rag weaving in the centre, done on a variable reed. One of the tops has a pickup stick pattern in the centre. One of them is silk with cotton. You know, that's the idea really with these, is that you find a pattern that you like and you can make it loads of different times and it will always look different. Since then, because I'm always asked, as I've said before, put this Cutting Without Fear booklet together, because that's the worst thing for most people, is actually cutting the fabric once they've taken it off their loom. They imagine it's just going to fall to bits, but it really doesn't. But we've got lots of tips in there. And then my big thing is making a mock-up, because as I've said before, hand weaving does not like being unpicked. If you make a mock-up, you do all your alterations to the mock-up, you write it on your pattern, you keep notes, and then when you make your hand woven version, it shouldn't need any alterations at all. So this one behind me that I'm doing at the moment is for a summer dress. I've made a top which is about this long, and I'm trying to work out if I can make a dress as well on the same pattern. It's going to be for the summer. It has binding around the armholes, and then continuation for the straps. So I'm fiddling at the moment. I've made 2 or 3 versions of it. One of them I just didn't like, so that's what I spend quite a lot of my time doing. I use calico because I can draw on it or write on it. It's astonishing how quickly I can forget what I've done if I don't write it all down. And I find the easiest thing is to actually write it on the garment, left front, right front. Took it in here, let it out a bit here. Darts need to be a bit lower, all that sort of thing. As I said, we still get asked, why a small loom? Why not a bigger one? Why not have a loom that's 32 inches wide so you can weave a wide piece of fabric? Well, I just prefer weaving on small looms. They're easy to set up, they're portable, I can sit in the garden with it, I can take it to the guild, I can take it to a friend's house. 32 inches is a big old loom. I find them quite cumbersome, and I know a lot of people who've bought them because they seem good value and then they still weave just on the centre bit. So I'm really happy with my looms. In fact, I've just bought the 16-inch Ashford rigid Heddle loom, and I bought all the Heddles, same as I've said before. Otherwise, it's like only having one size knitting needles. I've just taken this off it. This is cotton for the warp and hand spun ramie for the weft. Lovely, lovely piece of fabric. So this is going to be for the top version of this. So it's going to be a summer top. So I might actually be in the right season for a change. I can get it made for this summer. So I've woven this. I will make it up first. And then I'm going to see what I can do with the pattern. I'm not quite there yet. I would love to make a sundress as well from the same pattern. So that's what I'm spending my time fiddling about with at the moment. So this is kind of up to date now. My next video will be basically help. My fabric has come up the wrong size. If anything, it's too narrow or too short. It's very rarely too big, because then you can cut it down. But so often something hasn't worked in between maybe doing the sample, or if you don't sample, you wash it and it's shrunk too much. In fact, it's just happened to me. The fabric was supposed to be 10 inches wide and I think it's about 8. So I'm having to be a bit creative with it. So that's what the next video is all going to be about. Thank you for watching, and next time I'll be sharing all my helpful tips on how to rescue your piece of fabric. I'm also going to add a photograph of our wonderful rose bush. Way back, one of the first videos, I walked down the garden and the rose hedge down the path was just bare in its winter clothes. Well, now it's in nearly full bloom and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's called Seagull. It only flowers once, but my goodness, when it does, it's glorious. Have a good week. See you soon. Bye now.